Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargav, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about the latest developments in the Sushant Singh Rajput case and what the CBI has now discovered. We also take a look at why a journalist and three others were booked under an anti-terror law in Uttar Pradesh. But first, we talk about the meeting that took place between the foreign ministers of India, US, Japan, and Australia. Unlike so many others during this time, the meeting actually took place in person on Tuesday in Tokyo. These four countries form what is called the Quadrilateral Grouping or Quad. In this segment, we talk to Indian Express's associate editor Shubhajit Roy, who reports on matters of foreign affairs for the paper, about what the Quad's purpose is, why it has met this time, and what it has to do with China's aggression. And to understand all this better, he first talks about how this grouping between India, US, Japan, and Australia came to be.
Now, how did it come about is an interesting story. So, in December 2004, if you remember, there was a tsunami which hit India's southern coast, in Tamil Nadu, as well as Andaman and Nicobar. At that point of time, Australia, Japan, and US they came forward with relief operations post tsunami, and that's how a tsunami core group was formed of these four countries.
Shubhajit says that this core group continued for some time. But nearly 2.5 years after the tsunami in 2007, a working level meeting of the Quad group took place in the Philippines. And around 3 months after that, the then Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe visited India for the first time.
And he gave a speech in the parliament in New Delhi. His speech was titled Confluence of the Two Seas. What he was hinting at was the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, how there is a continuity of the two oceans. And that's how he framed that this particular maritime region needs to be open and needs to be free and needs to be inclusive, where activities should not be challenged.
This region in question is where a lot of trading happens for the four countries involved. Now, about a month after Shinzo Abe's speech in the Indian Parliament, Shubhajit says that these four countries, along with Singapore, participated in a maritime exercise. This was in 2007.
But in 2008, then Australian Foreign Minister said that it would not be proposing to have a dialogue of that nature again, which meant that Australia essentially walked out of the quadrilateral grouping, presumably under pressure from China.
We'll talk more about Australia stepping back and China's role a bit later. But after nearly 10 years, Shubhajit says it was revived and has been meeting regularly since.
So, this particular meeting in Tokyo, which took place at the foreign ministers level, is a continuation of that. But this is only the second time that the Quad foreign ministers have met. And it is significant because last time they met because they were meeting on the sidelines of the UNGA. In this case, they all flew down to Tokyo to have this particular meeting in Tokyo, whereas right now all the countries, all the foreign ministers have been having their meetings virtually through video conferencing. But the fact that they all chose to fly down despite the pandemic and have an in-person meeting, it shows the significance and the seriousness with which the four countries now pursue Quad as a grouping.
What concerns this grouping is the freedom of navigation in the Indo-Pacific region. That is what Shubhajit says glues these countries together. This is also the region where the South China Sea lies and that most of the trade has to pass through. According to some estimates, more than $3 trillion worth of world ship trades cross through the South China Sea every year. Now, this is also a place where China has been showing its dominance.
And we have seen in the last few years, and especially in the last year or so, how China has been extremely aggressive in the Indo Pacific. And now, if you remember, after 2008, once the first edition of Quad really fizzled out because Australia backed out, China actually, for the first time, came up with the 9 dash line, which is basically the claim line in the South China Sea in 2009.
This claim line, represented by a 9 dash line, encompasses more than 80% of the sea.
So essentially, it waited for the Quad to dissipate and then it sort of put forward its claim in South China Sea. And since then, there has been tension in South China Sea, and that essentially triggered over a period of time to formation of the Quad. So they call for free and open Indo-Pacific. They call for maritime security. They call for following norms and institutions. They say that everyone should follow rules-based order. So these are the concepts under which all four are broadly on the same page.
Even though Chinese aggression does seem to be on these countries' minds, Shubhajit said that they don't explicitly mention China.
But their words and actions indicate a coalition of what they call the willing and the capable that seeks to ensure a favorable balance of power. They also seek to deter Chinese aggression and other assertive behavior and want to maintain what is called a rules based order, where they see a rising China is challenging through its actions.
It is an implied diplomatic effort to push against any Chinese aggression. China, unsurprisingly, has been critical of this grouping and has always viewed the Quad with suspicion and misgivings. Shubhajit says that it feels that these countries are ganging up on it. But it's not just China. Other countries who are friends and partners of the Quad countries have also criticized it. One is that there has never been a joint statement by the Quad.
So after each meeting, there are separate statements by each four countries. It was evident this time also. There's been never a military exercise of the four countries. In fact, Malabar exercise, which is between US, India, and Japan, it has invited Australia once and then it has never invited it again, although there are plans now to host a four-country military exercise. So that has sort of not happened so far, precisely not to give an impression that it is a military alliance. And also, many people feel that the Quad grouping lacks a purpose and it doesn't have an institutional framework.
Its critics, like China, also find its partners unreliable, citing the unpredictability of the US and the time when Australia had walked out of the Quad. Moreover, Shubhajit points out that the Quad countries have their own set of differences and things that they don't agree on, like the definition of the term Indo-Pacific. These four countries, however, have been having conversations with each other throughout the pandemic. Among other things, they have been exchanging notes on how to combat COVID-19.
Also, Australia, India, and Japan have recently announced what they've called a supply chains resilience initiative, essentially referring to the fact that all countries are dependent on China for a lot of their trade, a lot of their raw material, a lot of their manufactured goods. So they should all diversify. So there's now concept and a conscious attempt to diversify away from China.
The four countries are also cooperating militarily, strategically, and diplomatically.
So, for example, India has 2+2 ministerial meetings with all the three Quad partners, with Australia, Japan, and the US. It has signed key agreements in military and logistics, in reciprocal services between the navies of the countries. So there's a lot of diplomatic as well as defense partnership that we have seen that has unfolded in the last few years. And that is now coalescing with a lot of the other countries like France, Indonesia, South Korea. The Quad countries also have trilaterals with each other. That is, not all Quad countries don't always meet with each other. Three groupings of three, they meet with each other. Also, they have trilaterals with France, Indonesia, and South Korea. So, all in all, there is a broader strategic coalition of what is called like-minded countries on a range of issues, from COVID-19 to Chinese assertion in Indo-Pacific, or even in supply chain resilience. So in all these areas, there have been extensive cooperation between these Quad countries.
India attending Quad's in-person meeting in Tokyo takes significance at a time when India has been in a 5-month-long standoff with China in eastern Ladakh. The question that a lot of people have been asking, though, is that will the Quad grouping help India with its border crisis with China? Would the other three countries come to India's aid at the LAC? Shubhajit says that while all three countries have publicly made statements that have been supportive of India's stance, it is unlikely that they would come to India's aid at the border. India would have to fight its own battles.
It cannot depend on others to fight its own battle, and it's not fair to expect that as well from its friends and partners. Having said that, there is a value in strategic coalition because it then puts pressure on the adversary that India has powerful friends and allies and partners who will give diplomatic, political, and maybe some support, which push comes to shove, it may be useful and helpful for India to combat China. And at this point, all the Quad countries coming out and meeting India and having bilaterals in Tokyo, as well as the quadrilateral grouping, is a key marker for India, because globally it is seen as a closing of ranks against China.
Though considering China has been critical and has always viewed the Quad with apprehension, India's participation in the Quad meet right now has raised questions about whether this will lead to new conflicts for India. India has in the past been hesitant to be part of any grouping or alliance that might be seen as anti-China. In fact, in his piece, Shubhajit points out that while India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, who attended the meet, described the meeting as the Quad meeting, India's Ministry of External Affairs did not. Instead, it called it the second Australia, India, Japan, United States consultations on regional and global issues of common interest.
Now, traditionally, India's approach would have been to avoid such a high-profile meeting in the middle of an ongoing crisis, lest it provokes China further. But the fact that it agreed to meet in person is a sign of change, especially in its perception of approach towards Beijing. But obviously, how things pan out from here on, whether it leads to more confrontation with China, with the Quad countries, including India at the LSE, is something that we will have to see, observe, watch closely, and also the hypothesis that the Quad grouping have shared values and shared concerns and they will stand up for each other will be tested if there is a potential conflict between China and the Quad countries.
Dear listeners, sorry for this interruption, but before we move on to the rest of the show, I just wanted your quick attention. One of the big reasons people say they like this show is because it helps them understand the news better. It provides them with the context they need to see the bigger picture. And there is perhaps no other place that does that better than Indian Express's Explained section. We on Three Things refer to the section regularly, and it helps us make this show. If you're a regular reader of Indian Express, you know how useful the Explained section can be, especially when you're looking for in-depth analysis by the right experts. You can log on to indianexpress.com/explained and access the coverage 24/7. Explained by Indian Express, where news that matters is explained by experts who know the subject. Now, back to the show. Next, we talk about the Sushant Singh Rajput case. Ever since his death, which took place in June, there has been a lot of controversy around the Bollywood actor's case. There have been 3 federal agencies that have been probing 3 different things. You have the Central Bureau of Investigation, or the CBI, which has been looking into the cause of his death, whether it was suicide or murder. Then there is the Enforcement Directorate or ED that has been looking into the allegations of money laundering. And then finally, there is the Narcotics Control Bureau, which is probing the use of drugs and had earlier arrested Riya Chakraborty in the matter. Chakraborty had been in a relationship with Rajput. In this segment, we talk to Deeptiman Tiwari, who reports on corruption and government agencies for the newspaper, about the latest developments in the matter. And we first talk about the CBI case, which at least initially was the main focus of the entire controversy. The matter of whether the actor had been murdered or died by suicide.
One thing that has become clear is that the CBI has reached a conclusion that this was not a murder, especially after a panel of doctors from AIIMS gave a report that this was death by hanging due to suicide. And this was also CBI's initial finding in the case. If you remember, the CBI had sent a team to Mumbai in August after the case was handed over to it. And it had carried a forensic team with it. It had gone and checked all the circumstances, gone to Sushant Singh Rajput's residence in Mumbai and verified the circumstances of his death. It had also carried a dummy, life-size dummy of Sushant Singh Rajput and recreated the entire crime scene, like hanging the dummy from the ceiling and then, creating the entire crime scene. And it had reached a conclusion at that time in its initial findings that this does not appear to be a case of murder because there were no signs of struggle on his body. The initial forensic reports did not show any poisoning or sedation, which meant that nobody could have forced him to hang from the ceiling or sedated him and then hung him from the ceiling. So it had reached that conclusion on its own findings, but to be doubly sure, it had asked a panel of experts from AIIMS to examine the evidence, circumstantial evidence, and the forensic reports and everything, post-mortem report, based on which the AIIMS panel of doctors said that this is a case of suicide, and the opinion was unanimous.
So the chapter of whether he was murdered now appears to be closed, unless, of course, some fresh evidence emerges that suggests otherwise. The case will now focus on the actor's suicide, which itself has many angles. For example, Rajput's father had alleged that it was Riya Chakraborty that had impacted his mental health, and so Chakraborty had come under the scanner for abetment of suicide.
And now the CBI investigation is focused on the idea of whether Sushant Singh Rajput was forced to commit suicide by any circumstance or by any person, in which case Riya Chakraborty is under the scanner for that, or due to his own mental health, or because there was some sort of professional reason where we talk about Bollywood nepotism or several projects that he had earlier in his hands which slipped out in the months preceding to his death. So whether all of these came together, combined, forcing him to commit suicide, or some specific person or a group of persons were responsible for pushing him to take this extreme step, is a matter of investigation now for the CBI.
Deeptiman, however, points out that as far as Riya Chakraborty and the matter of abetment of suicide is concerned, the CBI so far has not found any motive.
As to what would Riya Chakraborty gain by forcing him to hang from the ceiling? For example, if she was looking for financial gains, CBI sources say that there is nothing in the forensic audit of the bank accounts held by Sushant Singh Rajput which suggests that there was any financial gain that was going to accrue to Riya Chakraborty by his death. Or even when he was alive, if Riya Chakraborty was siphoning of funds, no. In fact, the audit report prepared by Grant Thornton India shows that there were transactions of about 70 crore in the past 5 years in bank accounts held by Sushant Singh Rajput, of which just about 55 lakh were spent on Riya Chakraborty, which were more sort of in terms of travels, holidays, spa treatments, or gifts, which is expected out of a couple who are in a relationship.
Sources in the CBI tell Deeptiman that there is nothing to suggest that Riya Chakraborty would in any way gain, whether financially or in terms of a career in Bollywood, following the death of Sushant Singh Rajput. But still, as far as the CBI is concerned, the abetment of suicide angle remains open. Now we move on to the second agency, which is the ED.
Look, Enforcement Directorate was among the first central agencies to register a case in the matter. It took cognizance of the Bihar Police FIR, which Sushant Singh Rajput's father KK Singh filed in Patna, where he had alleged that 15 crore rupees were siphoned off from Sushant Singh Rajput's account, and he blamed Riya Chakraborty for that. And he said that, she forced him to take drugs, and he was administered drugs, and his mental condition deteriorated. All of that, he made allegations in that FIR. However, the Enforcement Directorate, which began a money laundering investigation in this matter, has not yet found any cogent evidence of a money laundering as yet. However, its investigation is still open, and it is possible that the agency might come up with some evidence later.
Right now, though, there is no evidence of money laundering. And like Deeptiman pointed out earlier, the transactions between Rajput and Chakraborty were nothing out of the ordinary and anything that would be called suspicious. Now we move on to the third agency, that is the Narcotics Control Bureau, or NCB, which is probing the drugs angle in the case. And it was actually the Enforcement Directorate's investigation that had led to that. And NCB has filed 2 FIRs in the matter,
in which we have of late seen maximum action. In fact, the only arrests in this entire case have been made by Narcotics Control Bureau and not by Bihar Police, not by Mumbai Police, not by CBI, not by Enforcement Directorate. So the drug angle appears to be the strongest angle in this case at the moment, where there is some sort of an evidence. This evidence was first gleaned out of the phones of Riya Chakraborty and her brother and certain other people, associated with the case, where there were WhatsApp chats about, purchase of drugs, and that these drugs were basically largely marijuana extracts, which were meant for Sushant Singh Rajput.
The NCB had claimed that Chakraborty had been involved in getting drugs for Rajput and had even accused her of being an active member of a drug syndicate. She had been arrested along with several others, including her brother and Rajput's former house cook. Though after being arrested for nearly a month, Chakraborty was released from the Baikula jail yesterday, hours after the Bombay High Court granted her bail.
Bail has been granted on the basis of the fact that there was no active involvement of Riya Chakraborty in any drug purchase or administering of drug or trade of drug anywhere. Let's remember, it was Shouvik Chakraborty who used to purchase the drugs.
Shouvik is Chakraborty's brother and is still under arrest.
And Riya Chakraborty never handled these drugs. There is no evidence to suggest that Riya Chakraborty consumed these drugs. So Riya Chakraborty was merely sending these messages. It was Shouvik who was in touch with drug peddlers. Riya Chakraborty was not directly in touch with drug peddlers. So this was one of the reasons that Riya Chakraborty has been granted bail. Also, there were charges of financing of, drug peddling and drug transactions, which have been found to be caught by the Bombay High Court, because there is not enough evidence at the preliminary stage to suggest that she was financing any kind of drug trade. So on these grounds, she has been granted bail. Let's remember that the Narcotics Control Bureau has registered 2 FIRs. And the first FIR, which was based on the WhatsApp chats which Enforcement Directorate gave to the Narcotics Control Bureau, in that FIR, not a single arrest has been made. In fact, the arrests have been made in the second FIR, which was registered after Narcotics Control Bureau arrested a drug peddler and seized a commercial quantity of cannabis from him.
This second FIR, through which the NCB has arrested 20 people, including Riya Chakraborty, was apparently done with the aim to cleanse Bollywood of drugs.
Now let's remember, under the Narcotics, Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act, unless you make a seizure, your case will not stand in court. Based on WhatsApp chats, it will be very tough to get conviction in the court. That is why we see that there has been little to no activity in the first FIR. and all the arrests have been made in the second FIR, which was registered after a seizure of commercial quantity of drugs was made by Narcotics Control Bureau from a local drug peddler in Mumbai. And it is in this case where the seizure was made, the second FIR, where Riya Chakravarti was arrested and has been granted bail, and Shovik Chakravarti still languishes in jail.
Deeptiman says that there are a number of things that stand out in these investigations and probes. Like, it's interesting that in a case of suicide, the Enforcement Directorate found a fit to probe a money laundering angle.
Now, of course, it will be incumbent upon the Enforcement Directorate to prove its case. It has time. It has registered a case. It will have to file a prosecution complaint in the court, and it will have to show what it has to charge the accused from Riya Chakravarti to several others with money laundering. Because, see, all that came out of the Enforcement Directorate probe, because initially it started probing a case of suicide, was drug racket, which had to be investigated by another agency. Now, as far as Narcotics Control Bureau is concerned, again, Narcotics Control Bureau started investigation based on WhatsApp chats. Now, as I said earlier, under NDPS Act, unless you make a seizure, building up a case is very, very difficult. So, of course, both the cases, as far as Narcotics Control Bureau is concerned, Enforcement Directorate is concerned, on the face of it, it looks slightly odd. However, Narcotics Control Bureau has gone ahead and made seizures of drugs, and it claims to have unraveled some sort of a wide network of drug peddling and drug consumption in Bollywood. So it will now depend upon the agencies. They have taken it upon themselves. They'll have to prove their cases in courts, both Enforcement Directorate and Narcotics Control Bureau. And that we'll have to wait and see.
And in the end, we talk about Uttar Pradesh and the Hathras gang rape case. A 41-year-old Delhi-based journalist working with Malayalam news outlets and 3 others were booked yesterday under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act and charged with sedition for their alleged links with the Popular Front of India and its student organization Campus Front of India. They were detained by the Uttar Pradesh police on Monday afternoon from a toll plaza in Mathura while they were on their way to Hathras to meet the kin of the deceased 19-year-old Dalit woman who was brutally assaulted and allegedly gang raped by 4 upper caste men last month. The Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, or UAPA, is primarily an anti-terror law aimed at, quote, more effective prevention of certain unlawful activities of individuals and associations and for dealing with terrorist activities. Also continuing with his attacks, UP Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath yesterday, referring to the Hathras gang rape case, came down heavily on those doing politics over the dead bodies of the poor and asserted that the government will deal with them with a heavy hand. He said this in a virtual meeting with the BJP office bearers of the Bangarmao Assembly constituency, which goes to buy polls on November 3rd. This renewed attack on the opposition has come a day after he alleged that there was a plot to malign his government's image by whipping up animosity in society. The Adityanath-led government has been facing intense criticism from the opposition over its handling of the Hathras case, including the hurried burning of the body by the UP police without the family's consent. You were listening to 3 Things by The Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav, and as always was edited and mixed by our producer, Joshua Thomas. Before we go, here's another reminder to check out Indian Express's Explain section. You can log on to indianexpress.com/explain and find in-depth analysis by the right experts. It has everything you need to know to understand the news better and see the bigger picture. If you like this show, then you can subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.